Welcome to the Trailhead from UltraSignup, where big adventures begin. Trail running is so much more than just a sport. It's a community, a culture, a way of seeing the world. On this show, we're not dissecting splits or debating shoe specs. We're here to get to the heart of it all, the people, the places, and the stories that speak to the soul of the sport. Join me, Zoe Rome, and my co-host, Brendan Leonard, as we'll bring you conversations with the everyday athletes, local legends, quirky characters, and creative minds who make trail running what it is. Messy, joyful, gritty, and deeply human. Because it's not just about chasing finish lines. It's about the friendships forged on long climbs, the lessons learned in the pain cave, and the weird, wild moments that remind us why this sport is about so much more than the miles. If you're enjoying the Trailhead, the best thing you can do is help other people find us. Follow us on Spotify and subscribe wherever you listen. That way you'll get notified when a new episode drops. And if you have 30 seconds, leave us a review. It really does make a difference. And if you know someone else who might be into this, send it their way. Word of mouth is seriously everything. While you're at it, check out 2 other shows from the UltraSignup podcast network. The Buzz with Buzz Burrell for the sharp philosophical deep dives you all know and love, and Between Two Pines for chaos and comedy. Something for every corner of your ultra running brain. Thanks for tuning in. This episode is brought to you by Running Warehouse. If you haven't spent time on the Running Warehouse website lately, it's genuinely one of the best places to shop for running gear. Not just because they carry basically everything you need, but because they actually help you figure out what you need. Good filters, honest reviews. They're not just throwing every shoe at you and hoping something sticks. A couple of things I've been loving from Running Warehouse lately. The Adidas Terrex Agravic Speed Ultra 2. If you want something genuinely fast on the trails, this is an incredible race day shoe that doesn't feel like a compromise. And for apparel, I've been reaching for pieces from the Patagonia Capilene Cool collection a lot this season. It's the kind of thing you can wear out on a long run and not immediately need to change out of the second that you stop. It's quick drying, sweat wicking, and odor resistant, not to mention extremely durable. Whether you're looking for shoes, kit, or just want to poke around and see what's worth your money this year, Running Warehouse is the best place to start. Link is in the show notes. Have you heard of TrailCon? June 22nd through 24th at Palisades, Tahoe, right after Broken Arrow and just before Western States. TrailCon brings together brands, athletes, and all stakeholders of the trail running community for 3 days celebrating the sport we all love. You can demo top-of-the-line gear, join activations, community events, and hear from expert panelists about what's shaping the future of trail running. And the best part, it's completely free to attend. Register now at trailconference.com or find the link in show notes.
Zoe, what's your favorite game?
I'm pretty impartial to Settlers of Catan. I don't know what your tolerance for depth resource trading games is, but like many millennials during the pandemic, started up a pretty intense fling with Catan. And this reminds me a lot of the discussion we had with our guest today, Thi Nguyen, talking about the difference between achievement players and striving players, because living in Colorado, a lot of my friends are elite athletes, pro athletes, or just like extremely intense mountain people. And we used to have a group of 4 couples that would come together and play Catan. And after about 6 weeks of this, we had to disband our game night because it got too heated.
Because everybody's achievement players, basically.
Because strong language was used. A loaf of sourdough bread was thrown. It got pretty messy.
Wow. Did you write an essay about this somewhere? Because
I showed. I was like, I guess you don't check that mindset at the door. Okay.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
What about you?
I don't know, I wouldn't say when I read CT's book, I was like, yeah, achievement players versus striving players. I'm like, I do not approach running from an achievement mindset at all. Which is fascinating to break it down to that. But yeah, I don't really do I don't really do very many games. We do Scrabble. We have this tradition of Scrabble at the holidays in my family, where it's my sister-in-law who's a professional writer, me, I'm a professional writer. Well, she's a professional writer and editor, professional writer, and then sometimes Hillary, who's a professional writer and editor, and then my dad, who did not go to college, was a butcher and a manager in a management in a grocery store for 43 years, and then he dominates everyone, which
Yeah, I
is
bet.
like, yeah. But yeah, it's fun. He actually doesn't dominate everyone every year, but it's a thing. But it's not like competitive. We're
Yeah.
fine. We're like, it's a thing to do.
And I do improv comedy, which at its essence is just manufactured games to incentivize different kinds of hilarity, of comedy, of improvisation. And I feel like that really epitomizes this idea of pick a set of rules or create a set of rules to incentivize the type of gameplay that you like. And the thing I appreciated about the score is it lit language to a lot of the things that I really like about life games or comedy, of like when you pick certain guardrails for yourself or certain structures for yourself, it can help focus your attention or focus your energy or prioritize different values in whatever you're doing. And uh, uh, I think that helped me sort of circle the square with feeling a little reluctant to call myself competitive, but also being someone who just like really likes gameplay.
Yeah, I think like I was coming up with hard time to come up with something we do that is not for money, that is not a game, because like
Yeah,
ultra marathon running's a game. It's like
it's a game.
they make up rules for you. You can't have somebody carry your stuff. You have to go 100 miles. You can't take shortcuts. Like these are the rules. And like if you just wanted to get from point A to point B, you would probably just drive there, but we have the rules, so it's a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's made me become more aware of rules in a fun way rather than being like, rule, like just viewing them as these sort of arbitrary limitations on things. Now, whenever I see a rule, I can pay a little more attention to like, ooh, what is this one trying to achieve? Like, what is this trying to make me pay attention to? Is it
Mm,
successful in that way? And I feel like it's made me become even more, as someone who's already pretty wary of data and metrics, as anyone who's like come of age in I think this journalism environment, where like in the course of a few short years we went from like your writing should be good to like clicks is life. And being kind of innately skeptical of how these systems can subvert our values and sort of incept our work with their exterior values. And what I really liked about getting to explore the philosophy of gameplay is trying to figure out where I maybe have more agency to create rules and structures for myself, to figure out where my values are in conflict with other systems and people's values, and how I can have more fun trying to play towards my own ends in certain things.
mhm. Also, just a fascinating character. Like we go from
Fascinating.
rock climbing to like board games to video games to yo-yo, like really high end yo-yo stuff. Which I think we're probably never going to have another person who's this into yo-yoing on the podcast. But
I think it is safe to say that he is the only philosopher elite yo-yoing rock climbing food journalist we've ever had on the
yes,
podcast.
yes, that
A
too.
lot of
Yeah,
superlatives.
yeah,
Um,
yep.
and the conversation is exactly as wide ranging as we have made it sound. So let's dive in.
Hi, I am Thi Nguyen. I am Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Utah. I have some very weird specialties. I do philosophy of art. Mostly, I've been doing the philosophy of games. And I do something called social epistemology, which is basically how people in social groups learn and cooperate together to know stuff or to deceive each other about stuff. And I have a new book that's kind of about both.
Your big idea that you tackle in your most recent book, The Score, and I want to sort of explain this right off the bat for our listeners, is that games are an art form and they work in the
Yep.
medium of agency. Can you
Yep.
sort of walk us through what those things mean,
Yep.
big picture?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this comes from a place of irritation and rage. So I was teaching philosophy of art, and I was doing a case study on video games, whether they're or not their art. We read a bunch of stuff, and it was all about how they had cutscenes and dialogue and good cinematography. And I was like, this is not what I like about games. This is, people that know how to talk about movies applying it. And I mean, I'm sure some parts of games are good movies, but there wasn't the stuff that I loved about games, just the difficulty, the interesting decisions, the feeling of your skill growing, the feeling of either trying to figure out how to move or trying to figure out how to move through the decision space or logic space. And I found two things that really helped me. One was Bernard Toot, who's a philosopher I love, who has this definition of what a game is that I found so illuminating. So a game for him is to play a game is to voluntarily take on unnecessary obstacles to
Honestly,
create
that in a nutshell, I was like, this is running. This is the best description of ultra running I have ever heard.
Yes, right. It's voluntarily taking on unnecessary obstacles to create the possibility of struggling to overcome them, which I just love. I mean, it's so revealing in so many ways. I think one way he puts it is that games are constitutive inefficiencies. And what that means is you have a goal, and for me, running is I'll admit I'm not a runner, but running is the easiest case. If you're running a marathon, there's a point you're trying to get to, but that point in space isn't the point, because if it was the point by itself, you would call an Uber, take a bicycle, take a shortcut, right? The point is to do it inside a certain constraint. And what a game is something where the goal only counts as the goal if you did it inside a constraint. So he literally at some point says that playing a game is taking the long way, but it's kind of funky. Playing a game is not just being maximally inefficient, because you're not just trying to do it dumbly. You create an inefficient constraint, and then you struggle to do it as efficiently as possible inside the constraint, which means whatever is valuable has to be in the process of trying to be efficient inside this weird inefficiency, which means it's about, I think what he's saying is that games sculpt a kind of action. I'm sure you can talk about running. For me, with rock climbing, I'm a climber, and I think one of the interesting things about climbing is there's all these constraints. So climbers, free climbing, not free solo climbing, by the way, which is a different thing. Free climbing is something where you use ropes and gear only to catch your fall, but you ascend only using your hands and the feet, right? The gear is just there for safety. And what that means is that activity basically removes tool use. You can't use ladders, you can't spike the wall, you can't break the wall to move up. You have to adapt your body to the wall. And that goal and that constraint shapes this hyper interesting, hyper variable, delicate experience where, if you're allowed to use spikes and dynamite and rope ladders, you wouldn't have to pay much attention to the rock. But this constraint set means no. Now you have to look for a tiny indentation that's almost invisible with a bit of friction. And then you have to learn to use your ankle and roll just a millimeter left and apply some tension. And all that wouldn't happen without those constraints and goals.
I was going to say, in my former life as a climber, I had a friend who's an older mentor, and I forget where we were, but there was this very funky roof you had to get over, and this is a trad climb, so you had, and I've just battled and just had to get myself in the weirdest position. Finally was able to get over it, and I couldn't see him this entire time, and I got to the belay, and I said, "How did you get through that roof?" And he goes, "Oh, I just pulled on a piece of gear." And same guy at one point was like, "There's no cheating in climbing, only lying." Which I think, as of reading your book, that's kind of a line you might love to take apart at some point. But it's yeah, you can do your own thing and get to the top, but you're just lying when you say, "Oh yeah, I sent it," yeah, I thought you'd enjoy that.
I think it's actually super interesting because there's a really interesting difference between cheating and adapting the game to what. I think what we're often doing with a game is this will skip to the big grand finale of the book, but a lot of the book is about why scoring systems are often so delightful in games and often so terrible in institutions. And one of the big answers is that in games, you can change games and you can modify the game. Like for me, like video gaming, you can speed run it, you can house rule poker. And there's this really interesting tension about whether or not you're cheating or whether you've house ruled what will give you the best experience. I mean, in some sense, what cheating is misrepresenting what you're doing. But if like, there are definitely cases where I think like, if there's, okay, rock climbing example.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's a climb, it's harder than I can do, but I hear it's totally beautiful and I'm only going to be there once. And the bottom move, I just can't do. Sometimes I'll just skip the bottom move. And I'm not going to tell people that I sent the official climb, but I got to have a beautiful experience by modifying the thing. And I mean, I think it's a really interesting tension because if you modify everything in climbing, if you cheat out of everything, then you're never going to have this interesting sculpted experience. But sometimes a controlled, like, well, I can't do that first move, but the rest of the line is beautiful. So I'll just skip it. And that's the thing I did. I skipped the first move and I did the rest under this constraint and I got to have a beautiful experience. I think as long as I don't lie about it, then I haven't cheated. I modified a particular game or problem into a slight alternate version that is giving me a lot of pleasure and beauty, and that's fine. That's what you can do with games.
We in running and ultra and trail, and the sort of came from the road world. There's been this huge leap forward in terms of shoe technology with carbon plates in shoes. So when this technology first became available, people were like, do we want to have this? And it was really widely debated, and the governing bodies of marathons were wringing their hands and eventually came down on, well, this doesn't add artificial energy. It's just extremely efficient at returning whatever energy the runner through their stride is putting into the shoe. Unlike springs, which is actually giving you more energy other than what you put into the shoe, which running on springs would be cheating. In the world of trail, it becomes even more arbitrary because in the United States, there are lots of races for reasons of either aesthetics or conservation. They don't allow trekking poles, whereas in Europe, like everyone's using trekking poles all the time, and it's not seen as this like artificial aid. Whereas in the United States, because we have like a little less trekking culture and our trail culture evolved a little more out of road running, people are like, nope, poles, not good. That is cheating. That is too much help.
Okay, let me try a theory by you because this is actually, we are into the geekiest section of the book.
It happens shockingly quick.
Okay, which I like never get to talk about because most people want to talk about serious adult stuff and not games, but this is game. So I'm interested in whether it's arbitrary or not because a lot of the times one of my theories is that what looks arbitrary in a game actually makes perfect sense from a design standpoint because the arbitrary constraint produces a different kind of activity. And one of my arguments that games are an art is that there's no rule. So one of the things about art, one of the classic ideas about what art is there's no specific rule about how to make good art. You often have to try things and find out. And with a lot of game design, when you read game design diaries, and I now teach in a game design program sometimes, you just have to, you'd be like, what if I add this constraint? What if I add this little rule? What if and then you let people play it and you're like, oh, that's more interesting. Or, oh, that's less interesting. You just kind of find out. And people who often, when they play board games, are like, I need to understand every rule before I can play. You're like, no, it's this very carefully, artfully sculpted experience. And I think a lot of sports are a little bit different because they evolve more slowly than board games. But here's, to me, in the climbing world, one of the funkiest questions. So in climbing, what we've decided is we don't allow, in most cases, in free climbing, what we used to do in aid climbing, which is hauling on the spikes, hauling on the gear. You put most of that technology off. We do allow expensive, high technology rubber shoes that are carefully downturned. So why allow one tool and not the other? So my theory is if you allow spikes and aid and rope ladders, it makes each of the climbs less interesting because you have a smaller variety of motion. Downturned shoes, it makes some climbs easier, but it opens up so many new climbs. There's so much more overhanging climbs that you get access to that if you allow that, the space of climbing gets more interesting, right? Certain climbs turn easier, but what you unlock is a whole vista of new climbs that are actually way more interesting and way harder and way more acrobatic. And I get to be able to do like weird sideways spins and like leg over stuff and like that I could never do without fancy shoes. So I think in that case, there's a game design answer where some tech makes things more interesting and less. So one of my theories is, I think isn't it Olympic swimming that at some point disallowed a certain kind of ultra frictionless suit?
Yeah, now you
Yeah.
can't like cover your whole body. You can
Right.
only wear the jammers for
Right.
men.
So my theory is that tech, and I don't know a lot about swimming, but my philosophy of games theory is that tech doesn't make the game more interesting. It just makes it about which country can afford more expensive suits, where rock climbing shoes makes the game more interesting for everyone and actually makes my theory is that frictionless suits don't make it about human skill, but downturn rock climbing shoes actually increase the density of human skill on display because they open up the terrain that you can do.
I think that's exactly true for our point. I guess not arbitrary rules turn the volume up or down on certain qualities in the
Right.
game that we enjoy. Like for the super shoes and marathoning, allowing carbon plates enhances the speed and beauty of the natural human gait that we like in road
Right.
running. Whereas the trekking pole thing in Europe, I think you see a slightly different value set around what they find exciting in trail and ultra running. Whereas in the US, it's a little less mountain culture based. And so it's a little more running forward and trekking.
Right.
If you're using poles, you're doing something that's considered a lot more walking adjacent than true running. And so
Right.
these rules incentivize like what we want to get out of these certain activities. So I think that's a really important sort of delineation. Is they're not, in fact, very arbitrary.
So the carbon steel plate, you're saying, makes the experience of movement more pleasurable?
Yeah, because it's sort of, some people are super responders to carbon plates. And unlike springs, which again is just like, that's a whole different technology, it would like actually fundamentally change what running is. Whereas carbon doesn't fundamentally change what running is. It just gives you like a little more bang for your buck rather than like doubling down on the money you're putting into something.
I think the interesting thing about downturn shoes, of course, the climber and the trail runners are talking about shoes now. The interesting thing about downturn shoes is because, for people who don't know, they're like little like rubber ballet slippers that turn your foot into a claw. One of the things that's most interesting for me about climbing is how much a climb will depend on a couple millimeters of rotation of your ankle, or like exactly how you're applying the pressure. And downturn shoes turn up the resolution. Like, you get more detail and there's more complexity in what you can do. And it gives you a little bit more ability to be like, to angle in even more precisely. So it like increases. I feel like I have more interesting decisions to make when I have downturn shoes, because I have more dimensions in which there's a movement that's meaningful. And so that tool opens things up, which I think is super interesting.
It makes it more cool instead of less cool.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it more cool. Basically, yes, it makes it more cool. I mean, it's the same as like, the history of the shot clock in basketball, right? Why add this arbitrary rule to make people shoot? Because if you don't, people just get ahead and sit on the ball, and that's less cool. And the answer is, if we're not just trying to win if we're not just trying to max out some number, what we're actually doing with games is we're pushing around I think the dumb way to think about games is there's some external metric and we're trying to do as well as we can by it. And what Suits teaches us about games is that the point system is just something we modulate in order to create an experience. This is nearby. So Reiner Knizia, my favorite board game designer, said that the scoring system is the most important part in the game design, in the designer's toolbox, because it tells the players what to want in the game. And I think part of his view, this is your original question about what I meant by the art of agency, is that the game designer is shaping what you want and what you're trying to do and how you do it in order to create an interesting experience, to make it maximally cool.
This is not unrelated, but most people hate aid climbing because it's not fun. It's like actually closer to construction than climbing, I feel like, in my experience.
And one of the things is, some people like it. And I think that's the side point of games, is that you don't have to play the same game. I think there's a reason why the majority of people want to free climbing as soon as, actually, I think shoes are what made it possible. Like and a lot of my like geeky obsession that I had to cut from the book involves like trying to chart exactly how a specific technology change makes yo-yo possible, or a specific technology change makes skateboard possible. History of skateboarding is really interesting, right? Because the big changeover is from ceramic wheels to rubber wheels, because before that you need you can't go over the kind of urban terrain on hard ceramic wheels. And so you get that one tech shift, and it just opens up this space of exploratory possibility. And I think this, like, climbing shoes took one step forward, and suddenly you didn't need to aid climb. Like, we could do this funky stuff. And then once we figured it out, we were like, oh, let's add this rule and just make ourselves do it this way, because it's awesome.
I was thinking a lot about, just going through the book, are there things that adults do that we don't get paid for, that we're actively doing something that cannot be classified as games? I'm like, all and like I would see, rock climbing and ultra running are things people can be serious about and be like, oh, I don't view it as a game. But when you step back, you're like, yeah, it's totally a game. I mean, it's just
So Suits, I think the one way to Suits puts it is that he says basically what he's exposing is that there are two basic activities we do in life, which you could call work and play. And work is what you're doing because there's some resource that you need where the end is the point. And games are something where you're doing it because you want to be having a particular kind of play is where you're doing it for the sake of the struggle itself. By the way, little technical detail, work and play does not quite track to games and non-games, because some games for some people are work. If you hate running, but you are the world champ and it's the only way to make money, whatever. It's possible to, like, if you don't like poker, but it's your income, that's a game that's work. But the core distinction here, I think, is between work and play, between things you're doing for something on the outside and something you're doing for its own sake. And I think the hope is that a lot of us, when we have free time, what we're doing for its own sake, unless we've been so brainwashed that even in our free time, we continue struggling for some stupid external outcome that has no value. But I think this is in the ideal for someone, I think for Suits, for someone that actually realized what was going on. I mean, okay, let me give you the I feel like I'm really amusing you too. Let me give you the intellectual background. So Suits, at the end of The Grasshopper, he has this argument where he says, imagine utopia where technology has solved all our practical problems, medicine, resources, there's no scarcity anymore. What would we do with our time? We would play games, or we would be bored out of our minds. So games must be the meaning of life. Some of my students hate this argument, but I mean, so Suits was an Aristotle scholar. This is just his version of an Aristotelian argument. Aristotle says the value in human life does not come from outcomes or products, but from activity, rich, difficult activity.
He would have been an incredible ultra runner.
I think it's at some point, like, this is an explanation for people. I climb, you all run. Everyone on the outside looks at it and says it's stupid. And what Suits says is the least stupid thing to do is something that's interesting and difficult for its own sake. That is the source of all value, and we've just forgotten that and been persuaded that all that matters is countable outcomes. But this is what shit is actually for.
So that's games at their best, right? Like they're this thing that can wake us up. They give us this experience of striving and of play. In your new book, you talk about what happens when that goes wrong and we start to lose track of the, if not arbitrariness, like how artificial the scorekeeping is. And your term for it is value capture. Can you define that for folks at home?
So value capture is what happens when your values are rich and subtle or complex or developing that way. And then you get parked in a social or institutional setting that feeds you a simplified, typically quantified version. And the simplified version takes over in your reasoning and values. So when you go on Twitter to connect to people and then you start just caring about likes and follows, or in my case, you become a philosopher because you love it. And then you get obsessed by status rankings or citation rates, or you go to school to learn stuff and then you get obsessed with your GPA. In each of the cases, what's important is there's some significant gap between what matters and what's easy to measure. And I mean, I think you can see a lot of the examples are really easy. If you want to max out your GPA, you should take a lot of easy classes, right? If you want to max out your Twitter score, you should do a lot of rage bait, like shallow rage bait. The interesting, I think, so there's a simple version of this. It's like games are good, metrics are bad, metrics are out of your control, games are under your control. But I think it's possible to be value captured in a game too. And I'm really interested now in your example. So what this looks like for me is one more piece of terminology. Sorry, too many terminologies. You invited a philosophy professor.
Gotta define exactly. This is what we do.
Okay. So one of the big thoughts behind this is something I learned from my mentor in grad school, Barbara Herman, where she was like, you always got to remember the difference in a goal and a purpose. And I'm like, what's the difference in a goal and a purpose? And she said, when you invite your friends over for cards, the goal is to win, but the purpose is to have fun. And even if you lost and had fun, then you got your purpose. And I think, like, for me, the goal of climbing is to go up. The purpose is to calm my head and make my body feel good. And the interesting thing is, to get those effects, I have to try to go up, but I can fail to climb anything and still achieve bodily satisfaction and mental clarity. And I think freedom in games, non-value capture, comes when you take the scoring systems on and you use them for your deeper purposes. In climbing, what that looked for me like was, for a really long time, the difficulty scoring system in climbing was great for me. It helped me tune into my body. And then after 6 or 7 years, I stopped progressing because I'm old and I'm a parent and I don't have a lot of time. And then I couldn't progress and I was miserable. And what happened eventually was I had to change the scoring system. So for me, I now basically aim for maximum elegance in climbs, which is not something that's externally monitorable, but I can aim for it. And I think, but that is modulating a scoring system or a goal for your own larger purpose. Value capture in a game would look to me like if there was some external measure and you just sucked onto it and you didn't modulate it, and even if it made you fucking miserable or destroyed your body or like wrecked everything you love, you kept going for that one metric, typically because, so in the institutional case, what it's going to look like is the institutional metric is whatever your institution cares about, KPIs or profits or products shipped. In the games case, what it'll look like is there's some external, for example, major competition system that has one particular version of the game, and it doesn't fit you and what you like, but you just do it no matter what, because it's the clearest external measure. So does that sound like stuff from running?
Yes. This plays out in my life in there's this app called Strava, which is like a social activity tracking app where you go do your private run and then it gets uploaded for everyone on the internet to like and comment on and judge. And it has this feature called segments where if you run a certain like random distance that someone else like made a segment on, you get like a little cartoon of a trophy. And the amount that these cartoon trophies change how I feel about things is really crazy, because when I first was on Strava and trophies were happening, I was like, oh, this is sort of like a byproduct of like, if I have a good run, I might get a trophy. Now I have to work really hard to not be like, if I did not get a trophy, this is not a good run, and have like found myself going a little bit faster in certain places where I know there's a segment trying to get this like complete and totally fake digital trophy for absolutely no reason other than that it feels pretty good to get this little fake digital trophy, and to have like changed my behavior in the real world to appease this little digital scorekeeper.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's for no reason at all, but I mean that's exactly the thing I'm thinking about. It's just I got a piece of email from someone who was like, they were like thanking me for the book. They said it was really useful to them, and then the example they gave, I mean, and I don't want to make fun of, like, I've had the exact same experience a billion times in my life. His example was like, he got up and he really wanted to go skiing because it was beautiful, but it wouldn't give him as many steps. And so he was going to run on his treadmill. And he was like, thank God that I just read your book, because that it was okay for me to go skiing on a perfect ski day. And I was like, A, holy shit. And B, this is also like the life like my life was in spending years writing philosophy shit that I hated because it would, I mean, it was incentivized too, but mostly because of this thing. So I have a theory. It's not just for no reason. It's one of the reasons we're so drawn towards this is communicative legibility, right? Like weird internal sensations and joys are hard to communicate. A lot of what metrics are about things that are externally measurable. So part of the theory of the book is that what a scoring system is a system that renders a single verdict officially. And one thing it took me a really long time to realize that I screwed up in my first book was that you don't need scoring systems to have games. Skateboarders can go to the skate park to do the coolest trick. There's no scoring system because there's no single judgment. Everyone can decide in a different sense of cool. You can have a cooking competition with your friends to make the best dish, and everyone can have dinner, and each person can award a best dish, and there's not a single system to decide the one winner. That's fine. It's when skateboarding moves to the Olympics that we see a shift to height and number of flips. Do you want the most fucked up example?
Bring it.
Okay, here we go. This was cut from the book for grossness by my editors.
all
Are you ready?
right.
No, we
Okay.
have to
Love
hear it. Yeah.
So while I was researching this book, I started researching pickup artist culture.
Fascinating.
Because pickup artists compete for sexual success. And they've actually been really well studied by sociologists and anthropologists, and the literature is awesome and weird. And you probably know that pickup artists don't compete for certain things like quality relationships,
Right.
They tend to compete for things like number of phone numbers in a night, number of sexual acts in a night, speed from meeting someone to a sexual act. And notice they all have this character. They're easily publicly accountable. And then I found out the most amazing thing. So the sociologist Eric Hendricks documents how so many pickup artist cultures tell pickup artists to stop worrying about happiness or pleasure because that will just get in the way of success. Okay. Right.
I'm gonna throw up in a bucket over here.
Yeah.
I'll be back in a second.
Hey, I had thought pickup artists would be evil, but enjoying themselves. It turns out
Right.
that capture by the publicly accountable is so great that it has drained even pleasure from sexual competition. Right? And the reason seems to be, and I mean, like exactly this. It's not arbitrary. It's that it's moving in the direction of what's publicly accountable and accountable. And, your joy in a beautiful run on a nice day is not publicly legible. Trophies are maximally publicly legible. They've been reduced to a binary that's also publicly displayed.
Exactly. People don't know necessarily if you're executing on the prescribed effort well, right?
Yep.
People are going to be running longer or faster or doing more vert, doing these things to manipulate specific numbers that are easy to measure rather than optimizing for like how many dogs can I pet or how much joy can I feel or how much is this going to actually help my physical or mental health. And those things become secondary when the yardstick becomes hyper fixated on these not random but these really finite two-dimensional not so subtle data points.
Yep, exactly. Strava is such a good example. Literally the only reason I didn't write about it in my book is at some point I decided that whenever I wrote about things I didn't have personal experience with, it rang false. So I just don't run. But I know it's a perfect example. I just didn't want to write about something that I hadn't lived and felt myself. So,
there's a discussion about sort of changing rules or the constraints of the game to fit your goals. And when I read this section, I was going to ask you to comment on it. I immediately thought of this, which it's supposed to be a poem by Gary Snyder, but I think it's apocryphal. I think somebody misremembered it or something, and it's just kind of gone on from there. But the poem goes, "We started fly fishing on the Russian River for steelhead. Then we started taking the points off our hooks. Then we started taking the flies off our hooks. And finally, we just decided to go swimming." And that's the whole thing. And it was reading the bit about your fly fishing mentor, Nicole. Yeah. I thought, that's exactly what happened. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. Although it's interesting, it doesn't go to the last stage. So Nicole is one of the people that taught me to fly fish, and she was very so in fly fishing. The kind of fly fishing I like the most is called dry fly fishing. This is the kind where you're trying to drop a little imitation insect on the surface of the water so it floats and you see the trout swim up and take it. It's awesome. It's also the least efficient method of fly fishing. Like, you catch the fewest fish. The most efficient methods often involve doing a little tiny bug imitation that sinks to the bottom, like a little larva imitation, and bouncing along the bottom. And there's this war because a lot of us love dry fly fishing the most. And sometimes it doesn't work at all. But there are a lot of times where you go out and you could catch 5 fish dry fly fishing through this intense, high, really intense stalking. Or you could catch 30 fish nymph fishing. And it's really there's a call for people to do nymph fishing, even though, some people really like it. I don't. I find it more boring. Some people like it, the same message. Some people like it, some people don't. But the thing that really bugs me is people who are like, I don't like nymph fishing, but you got to do it because you catch more fish. To which the answer is, you let the fuckers go.
Artists?
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
You are the pickup artists of the fly fishing world.
The line I had to cut from the book is, because we are all pickup artists, right? I think it's in some way. Here's another concept from philosophy that you all might like. It's called a self-effacing end. So a self-effacing end is an end
already feels so resonant.
Okay. A self-effacing end is an end that cannot be pursued directly. So One idea is relaxation is a self-effacing end. You cannot relax by being like, grr, relax. Actually, the way I relax, and I bet the way I relax is I'm going to climb to the top of something fucking hard. I think fly fishing is very meditative. But for me, meditation is a self-effacing end. If I sit and try to meditate directly, like seated meditation, I cannot. If you tell me, try to find signs of fish in moving water, I will stare at the water and I will instantly enter like meditative trance and stay there for like 8 hours. And I think like just go to the river and hang out. For some people, they might be able to get to meditation, but I can't. I can get there just fishing for the take with no hook, just floating something on the surface, but like that requires all the attentional focus. But the transition to the next step would just completely rob me of the kind of attentional focus that's giving me the whole thing I want anyway. I mean, what do you think? Does the self-effacing end thing fit trail running world?
Well, for sure. I like running. For me, it's like time to listen to podcasts or like K-pop and stuff that I don't normally have time for in daily life. And if you tell people you're just walking around in the woods listening to podcasts, you sound lazy. If you tell people you're training for an ultra, you sound like a badass.
or a dumbass.
Or a dumbass.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the audience.
Yeah.
Do you actually think the training is just a cover, or do you find the training for a goal to be part of? This is something I've been really interested in.
I do really love training, but I also do feel a lot that it's scaffolding for play I would be doing otherwise, but just makes it communicable to it gives it a framework that makes it more universal than I like to run a shit ton.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I've just noticed in a lot of the things I do, rock climbing, fly fishing, there are competition scenes, but it's not central. Like most of the people who do it aren't doing it in anything like competition. Most of the people I know who run seriously, races seem to be a central part, an organizing part of the activity. And I've always wondered why it's like so distinctive to running world that I almost no one I know who does climbing like cares about the comp scene. I mean, a few people do, but it's tiny. And most of the serious runners I know really want to run races, and I've never known why.
Yeah, this is just me, but I think a lot of like there's only like 10% of the people who are at a race who are actually competing.
Okay.
And then, there's a few, you could say I'm trying to get the best in my age group or whatever, but I think a lot of people, it's actually just like a community gathering, like sort of like a convention almost, or
a convention where you pay a few $100 and people set up snack stands for you in the woods. So it sort of facilitates. I don't think I'd really want to run 100 miles on my own, but that becomes a lot more easy and interesting when the Rotary Club of Telluride or whatever is out there slinging Gatorade and grilled cheese sandwiches.
That makes total sense.
I think so. I think there is a way where it facilitates this sort of interior orientation, but I also think there is an Instagram effect of people really going after these sort of milestone events like 100 miles, 50 miles, like especially in the US, these box checking distances are really big, whereas in Europe they're a little less big. And a fascinating stat from UltraSignup where we do this podcast is the majority of people only ever race one race on the platform. For many people, racing an ultra is just a bucket list thing. They're like, I want to run 32 miles, boom, check mark, done. And I think there is a little bit of this Instagramification of pics or it didn't happen in ultra running as well.
Yep. There's a cynical reading and an optimistic reading of bright lines. I mean, I think it's part of the background idea is that really about games is that really bright, clear lines are interestingly motivating and are interestingly focusing. And the whole point of some scoring systems is like it helps construct the activity and give it bite. So it's pretty clear to me that like if there is a big thrill in climbing to be like, oh, I've never climbed a V5, I'm going to fight for my first V5. Oh, like it's focusing and motivating in a way. And so there's a way in which adopting, I mean, what games are you adopt arbitrary goals because the process is fun. And so pointing to any particular goal and being like, well, that's fucking arbitrary. It doesn't like, right? Like,
right.
The whole point is that in games, you're doing stupid shit to hit some hard line, and sometimes that's awesome. And so,
again, just another incredible tagline for the whole sport from CT here. Doing arbitrary, stupid shit for no reason.
Is games, but also is life. Sorry, that's just existential
truth. It's at the top
truth.
of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think, really. That's what we're saying.
Play. I mean, it is
Yeah. Yeah.
it is unsurprising that many accounts plays at the top of a lot of value structures, except under corporate control. Okay, so yeah, but the question is, it's going to be one. I think it's a value capture question again. Is it too sticky? Are people drawn to it even when it sucks? The claim is that this goal is arbitrary and a sharp line, and so therefore that's bad. What we've learned from games is that all games are like that. It's that, is this arbitrariness the right arbitrariness for you, or have you been sucked in for unimportant reasons into an arbitrariness that destroys your soul?
I have this is sort of a good segue. Later in the book, this is chapter 26, Play for Its Own Sake. You have this paragraph about high art versus low geek culture. And so I'm just going to summarize a little bit, but high art being where, this is a quote, where a singular genius broadcasts their art out to us lowly masses and we just soak it up in relative passivity. Low geek culture is tabletop role-playing, fan fiction, cosplay, that it actually allows participants to be creative. And I'm reading this and I'm going, this is kind of like spectator sports versus participatory sports. You know, like if I'm sitting next to somebody on a plane and they say, do you like sports? I would say, yes. But I would say in the US, they probably think, I mean, that I like watching football or basketball, but really, I mean, no, I like running, you know, or rock climbing or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, the original thought was just something like, just noticing that so much of what people denigrate as geeky low art is where creativity is democratized. And I think like people kind of assume, like, I mean, I don't know. On the one hand, you might think, even if you're grant like the average fanfic has less, I don't know, literary quality than the average published novel, people in the community are making it themselves, and there's a huge difference. Like how much artistic value is there in making it yourself? And I think that's something that people it's what, from the standpoint I've gotten to, it's wild that traditional art culture makes fun of Dungeons and Dragons and role playing, because like, what is it like? What holier act is there than sitting around with your friends inventing stories together? Like that's that's like humanity. And I feel like it's the same thing. Like I haven't made this connection to spectator sorcerer. I remember one time I was lecturing in front of like 200 students, and I was talking about climbing, and then one of the students was like, "So what sports do you watch?" I was like, "I don't watch sports." And he was like, "What do you do with your time?" I was like, "I do sports." And the whole class went, but it was that, right? Like I think it's really, it's super interesting that, like, I feel like the world of football is one that moves towards fewer and fewer people playing football. And I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's a way. And then other worlds, like, I've been on the side of this, but like someone I used to date used to be a triathlete, and she was like, the triathlon world is so welcoming, and part of the triathlon world is like, if you're in it, you're gonna do it. There's no spectator version. It's not tuned. I mean, I think maybe as something as interesting as like, that's not very tuned to spectatorship. It's just hard to capture that experience. It's so tuned to an internal experience. And I mean, I just think it's beautiful for a bunch of people to be like to be doing a thing together. Like, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Sports fan, lame. Dungeon master, cool.
Well, maybe like the end result as like trying and vulnerability are geeky as far as you're saying, but I'm also like, isn't fantasy football just kind of like Dungeons and Dragons for football fans?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's like role playing. You know, like there's some joke somebody had about like, what does your boyfriend do? Mine is the coach of an imaginary football team. You know,
I remember one time I grew up in very not sport watching, very geeky culture, and I was at a car wash listening to two people who are, you know, not very much not of the world I was from, talking about baseball stats, which is not a thing I care about. And I was listening to their tone of voice, and I was like, this reminds me exactly of my friends talking about Magic the Gathering cards. I was like, this is the same shit, just in different socioeconomic, but it's like, and yeah, like, I think, I mean, I do think a lot of the distinctions I'm making are oversimplified. Like a lot of our relationship to art culture is interpreting and arguing it for ourselves. A lot of people's relationship to sports is making the argument. And I mean, I am often tempted to think that people think that the point of art, even high art culture, is the product, the object, but you might think actually the most important thing is the ensuing conversation it provokes. And like maybe the health of a a uh literary world is in part measured by how healthy the critical and fanfic world is around it, and maybe the health of a sport, of a spectator sport, is in part in how participatory the fantasy version and the argumentative conversation is around it, because then you are cashing out in a kind of participation, although um yeah.
So, correct me if this isn't the best or an accurate framework, but games and play can sort of be a way of personalizing these things. You write in your book that games wake us up to a life of play. Metrics drive us down into grueling optimization, and metrics are that exterior pull that takes something personal and warps it into something that's sure maybe more easily communicable but means less to us. And I feel like that describes two totally different relationships that the a person can have with the same activity. So how do you differentiate between those like scores that enhance that game and the things that make it like that turn it into the grueling optimization that just like make everything tapioca pudding?
Am I not supposed to like tapioca pudding? Is that?
I mean, I think it's like the beigest. I don't know what the most beige. It's the most beige slurpable food I could think of. Yeah.
Okay. I think maybe part of the comedy here is the concept of beige is such that nothing could be the most beige. It's by its nature not.
That's true. Maximally, we've talked about maximum inefficiency, maximum beigeness.
Yeah, maximum beige. That's the name of my new band. Maximum beige. I think before I bury metrics, I must praise metrics. I don't know what those Shakespeare quoted. Anyway, so I think to understand the real importance, I just totally fucked that up.
I came here not to bury Caesar, but to praise him.
Yeah, I fucked it up. Yeah. To really understand the dilemma, I think we have to understand what metrics are for and why they're important. What we're talking about is large-scale data collection on categories that everyone can perceive. The whole point of metrics is that they're stable at scale, which is exactly why they're not highly tailored to particular people, right? GPA is a very blunt, simple measure that can cross categories. That's also valuable because that's the thing that allows large-scale data aggregation. Like the claim is something like big data is powerful because it's sufficiently insensitive to scale well, and it's weak because it's made super insensitive to scale well. It's important for me to admit that large-scale, insensitive, metric-based data collection is why I'm alive, right? This is what's the fuel behind antibiotics. This is what's the fuel behind my asthma inhaler that keeps me from like dying regularly. So metrics are important because they allow for clear coordination points for everyone to communicate around. I think the case where it's most obviously terrible are like being tied to the competition scoring system of fly fishing, and the things where it's the most important are things like, CO2 emissions rates, vaccination rates, poverty level, right? And I think in a lot of these things, we can admit that they don't capture everything that's important, but admit that they're a kind of rough communicative proxy for us to track really large scale efforts. But there's a huge loss in what they can be about, right? Like poverty level is not going to be happiness level. They're useful for large scale distant coordination. And then as guides to individual life and activity, they're terrible. Like individual life and activity, the thing that because of your own peculiarity, you should be guiding yourselves by scoring systems and conceptions of value that are finely tuned by you, that you figured out, like you should be able to, like, I tried marathon running, terrible. I tried trail running, a little bit better, sort of liked it. Still kind of boring for me. Then I tried rock climbing and I was like, fuck yeah. And this was like a travel through different scoring systems until I found one that fit, that both, I mean, all of these scoring systems are definitely ways to keep your body healthy and moving. And yet each of them answers to a very different psychological need. And I found one for myself. So I think the general story is one of high-grained, flexible control over the scoring systems you use. And of course, but that's in institutions, that's in combat with the way that institutions work. Yeah.
One little question to put a bow on things. If someone finds themselves essentially playing someone else's game, chasing experience, rather than chasing the experiences that brought them to the sport or their chosen activity, trail running, whatever it is, in the first place, what would you tell them? How can they shift back to playing their own game?
Yeah, I think the framing of games is really interesting because I think it makes salient the fact that they're disposable. You can quit. I think it's not a weird thing to think, oh, if someone says, like, I've been playing this board game with my family and we all hate it. I think the answer is stop playing it. Like, there are other games. And I think a lot of the times other things present themselves more like institutions. It's easy to think that, the whole problem of institutions is they often have one metric that's ruling. And when you wander into a system like climbing, running, there are a few external measures that are just so attractive. And I think the more you can think of it like a game in the sense of like a board game or a video game, and you think that the scoring system is not the be all end all, but something for you to use to get to the kind of mental state or activity you want. And you just relentlessly ask yourself, like, is this scoring system suiting my purposes? Is this a game that is fulfilling to me, or should I change? I think a lot of the times we forget that there are other options. There are tons of options. You can you can aim in climb. I don't know. You should tell me how this works out in running, but for me in climbing, you can aim for difficulty or you can aim for elegance. So in fly fishing, you can aim for the most fish or the biggest fish, or you can start to aim for the coolest eat. What this means is like what you're really trying to get is a fish to like come up in a particularly cool and exciting way. And that's just a different way to conceive of the activity. And you often do very different things. Like to do that, you often like get a little minnow imitation and then taunt a fish. And you don't get many, but you get fish like just erupting like sharks and jumping. And you're like, yeah, that's cool. That's a different way to conceive of the activity.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say for running, like choose like increasingly arbitrary dumb things, like do a distance that like you've never done, like do a 72-mile race so you have nothing to compare it to. Do it in like super steep terrain so that pace feels extremely irrelevant. Ideally do it under extremely volatile environmental conditions so that you're not tempted to compare it to previous years or other times on that same
I need to
terrain.
know the dumbest goals that you've pursued in running that have been valuable to you.
Wow.
So here's something from fishing. I just found out some people in fishing have started trying to catch the smallest fish they can catch, which put them in hyper tune with like weird parts of the ecosystem. Like they're looking for catching a little bit, and like that's pretty dumb, and it's also amazing.
During the pandemic, because I love Strava segments and anyone can create them, I created a series of Strava segments such that over the course of my sort of typical weekday run, if I completed them in the correct order, it would be the lyrics to Smash Mouth's All-Star. Because all of the races were canceled because it was the pandemic, and I was like, why not?
Like
I need
the whole
something
song or just
because
the
I didn't-
chorus?
Different, not the entire song, but like there was one run would do the chorus, and then there's another route where I have the bridge.
Wow.
So depending on the day, I could get different parts of the song, which is a very normal and cool thing for an adult woman to do.
That is performance art. That is
Thank you.
incredible. Yeah.
The years start coming and they don't stop coming.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if I have an answer for that. I feel like all my running goals are equally dumb, as far as the evolutionary sense of being human.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Perfect.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Dumbness is freedom. Like,
Yes,
I mean, that's
yes.
the point.
Yeah.
If you recognize that this is actually play, it helps to recognize how dumb it is. That's great.
Maybe that's the perfect place to end this trail running podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, CT. This was really fun.
Thank you so much.
Some races have a finish line. This one has a story that spans 3 years. The Baker Trail Ultra Challenge is a 50-mile point-to-point run through some of western Pennsylvania's most beautiful backcountry. Deep forest and gorgeous single track through the Cook Forest stretches of the North Country Trail with 6,200 feet of climbing and a start at the northern terminus of the 134-mile historic Baker Trail. Here's what keeps competitors coming back year after year. Every finisher earns one piece of a 3-part commemorative medal, one for each section of the trail. Complete all 3 and you get the full set, plus a commemorative display holder. You can run them in any order, which means this is so much more than just a race. It's a reason to keep showing up. Base camp is at the Brookerville Evangelical Methodist Church with a great pre-race dinner, camping on site, free shuttle to the start, and a post-race picnic at the finish. This is more than a race. It's a full-on community experience. Registration closes August 28th. Sign up today at UltraSignup.com.
Thanks for joining us on the Trailhead. If you love this episode, leave us a review. Share it with your trail crew and make sure to subscribe so you never miss an adventure. Give us a follow on Instagram at TrailheadPod. And you can reach us anytime at trailhead@ultrasignup.com. We'd love to hear your stories, questions, guest ideas, or just to say hi. And don't forget to check out all of the shows in the Ultra Podcast Network. We're building something special, and it's just for you. We'll see you every other week, right here on the Trailhead.